Thank you very much. Excuse me. That's very, very moving, Ravi. I'm very rarely at a loss for words, and this is one of them. You were very, very kind, and I very deeply appreciate it. I wish I were what you described. My colleagues, Gudmundur and Osamu, are participating, and I'm sure that as you were speaking, quite a few memories must have gone through their minds. We were a team, really, and I think we had one of the common features was our pragmatism. And working in a world of rhetoric and hype, you realize the need to keep your feet on the ground and to take account seriously of those who are standing on it, i.e. the common person. I will briefly describe the book, and later, if it's okay with you, I'd like to give a short presentation on the issue of accountability and sovereignty, if that's
Please.
okay with you procedurally.
Please.
Thank you. The book. After what I heard from Ravi, I am hesitant, but I have a note here to recall that throughout the existence of the Commission on Human Rights between 1946 and 2006, 2 states were members of that body without interruption. One of them was India. The other one, Soviet Union, who, as you know, changed to the Russian Federation in 1991. And to complete the record, ever since the Council set up in 2006, India was a member of the Council except in 2010 and 2018. So if there is a country rather, that has an institutional memory, certainly it's the government of India. And I say that seriously and with respect. As I went through the research for the book, India came up constantly. The role played cannot be overestimated rather, especially the personalities involved both in government and out of government. And I hope that in the second edition, I will add Ravi Naidu to the collection of famous Indian colleagues. Now, the purpose of the book was actually to furnish a complete record of everything that the Commission and the Council took up since 1946. And because I realized that as I was teaching, students were missing, there is somebody who was trying to get in, or somebody who was hammering to get out of somewhere. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I promise it's not me.
Ravi, do you have some work going on since you just moved? Do you have some work going on?
No, in my neighbor's house.
Oh, okay. It doesn't bother me. It might bother you.
You might want to mute. We may all want to mute our mics except the speaker.
Yeah, sure. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Now the hammering.
John needs to unmute.
I'm unmuted now. As I was doing this course, it was in Nepal, and it was just outside Kathmandu. It was a group of 35 young NGOs from South Asia and Southeast Asia, mostly. And they were impressive in their practical knowledge, and also very impressive in the need that they had to apply their practical knowledge to the international standards and the developments at the international level. So I had applied a little sort of trick I had of giving students what I called quick crons. one page, 10 lines, and you have the evolution of the declaration, another one, the treaty, and so on. So I said, why don't we try to create an omnibus thing? And that is why the book was developed. So in order to do that, of course, I was faced with two main challenges. One, of course, was the volume. The manuscript was about 400 pages more than what you have now. And the other one was the dynamics, how to be able to show that the content was actually the product of a number of circumstances, not least the political evolution in the larger world. And so I started putting it together, and I realized that the reader needed to keep a tab, or needed to be reminded constantly of what happened and when it happened. As a result, in the table of contents, at every single title or subtitle or sub-subtitle, you have in brackets a year. And that's the year when that issue was first taken up in the commission and in the council. And then the challenge arose of how to bring together the substance, the dynamics, because the commission was actually set up, as you know, as a drafting body. And when it launched itself, it kind of tried to draft the International Bill of Human Rights and was reasonably successful in completing the declaration within less than 2 years. But then the real trouble started when it was expected to draft the rest of the international bill, which are the international covenants and the first optional protocol to the Civil and Political Rights Covenant. Because of the political evolution going on around and the outside world, the membership of the United Nations change profile, and with that change of profile became a change of priorities. The newly decolonized states, when I speak later, I will give details, brought with them a need, a priority, which was to address two issues. One was the issue of self-determination, which is actually the decolonization process, starting momentum in the 50s and 60s. And the other one was the need to address those violations that they had suffered when they were under colonial rule. And so, rather than wait for the international bill to be completed by the, let's say, early 60s, within the commission, they pressed for ad hoc investigation. The book describes how that happened, and it gives quite a lot of detail. And we don't need to go into that now, but what it does tell us is that what we now call the special procedures overtook the legislative activity of the Commission. The International Bill of Human Rights only entered into force in 1977. At that time, the Commission had started looking at investigations, interpreting its mandate after a very, very complex debate. I counted more than 34 votes on the resolution to get into investigation, because the old school, including René Cassin, who is the eminent French Nobel Prize winner, founder of the Strasbourg Institute, and so on, Santa Cruz, and the others, were insisting on finishing the law first. But the new states said, well, we're never going to finish this law, because the Cold War had put a kind of halt on the development. And as the non-aligned movement emerged in the early 60s, you had some dilution, but still the fact remains that what started as a series of ad hoc decisions to look into specific questions materialized into something which we today call the of special procedures. Frankly speaking, it has never been a system. It is not a system. It's a set of ad hoc decisions by the Commission or the Council to investigate or otherwise look into specific situations under specific conditions, even though now, recently, relatively recently, the Council has tried to stylize or to make these procedures a little bit more kind of turn into a system. They're ad hoc. They all rely on the terms of reference that they remain that all this dynamics confuses students and confuses people. But it is important to understand that even though today we have two main sectors of activity, the conventions and the special procedures, still, in reality, they are constantly moving. It's as I always say, it is a dynamic process, and that is reflective of the anthropological nature of the subject, because it is, after all about human behavior, the behavior of civil society and government, and now of business and so on. Another interesting aspect of these dynamics is the issue which is described in the first chapters, I think chapter 1 even, where the divorce, it's called, the subchapter is called The Great Divorce. The divorce took place in the division of civil and political rights from economic, social, and cultural rights. Now that is the embryo which today looks at us as what Ravi mentioned as the role of business in human rights. Throughout that evolution, the business first was identified as an impediment composed of the policies of multinational corporations as being getting into the way of the implementation of civil and economic and social cultural rights. And later on, into the 90s with Kofi Annan's Global Compact at Davos. And today, of course, business, or philanthropy, if you like, is actually threatening, if not dictating, international, what should be international intergovernmental policy. If you look at WHO today, you will see that it takes for granted the input from what I call, or what people call, philanthrocapitalism. And that all has its source in that division in 1952, 51, 52. So the book tries to trace that. That's why you have a system in the digitized version. You have a system of references that enables you to hop from one chapter to the other on the same topic, so that you don't have to read the rest of the material and not get distracted by it. So the purpose is actually to anybody can use it. Now, in order to fit all this stuff in, I had to resort to constructing a virtual library. The library, the book has something like nearly 6,000 footnotes. And these footnotes contain something like 8,000 references. Each of those references can be easily retrieved from the digital library of the UN, the official library, in 6 languages in most cases, simply by entering that reference in the digital. And that's for that reason, the note at the beginning of the book entitled Note for the Reader is precisely intended, it's just one page, to show how easy it is to access the reports of all rapporteurs, by theme, all special procedures. And so it seems to have worked because, frankly speaking, I am using it myself quite a lot as I working on my second book and so on. Now, follow-up, a number of spin-offs, very interesting spin-offs taking place from these series of discussions like today. Yes, it's a big book, but as my dear colleague reminded me, it's also known as a brick, which can serve several purposes for those who may need self-defense or whatever. What else do we need? Yes. At the end of the book, there are two chapters. Chapter 10 is the one dedicated to civil society. That is essential for civil society to see what windows the civil society has, in what procedures and so on. And it gives also a description of how these procedures developed. I'll comment that later when I come back to this in the second part. But in any case, what I couldn't help, and please bear with me, as I say throughout the book, I'm trying my hardest for the book to speak for itself, for the Commission to speak for itself, because we read a lot of material about the Commission and the Council. A lot of that stuff is understandably negative. Not so understandably, it should be a bit more objective, but there you are. But the fact remains that when you go through this huge historical evolution, you end up with things you need to share. And that is basically the epilogue. In the epilogue, the book proposes first of all, a council of the whole. The council at the moment has 47 member states. And as you know, the fact that there are only 47, the Commission ended up with 53. The fact is that we have a limited number gives rise to endless, boring, and pointless discussions on who is good and who deserves and who doesn't deserve to sit on the council. Even the pledges that are required under 6251 are today just pro forma. There is therefore a need for the council to be an organ of the whole. It's not John Pace saying that, it is the eminent panel on threats and challenges shortly before the council was set up, which recommended with very good reason that the Commission and any future body should be open to the whole. Too much time and energy is wasted on deciding who deserves or not. As I always say, human rights is not a beauty contest. There is no such thing as better or worse. I do not like, and I don't think we should have tables like some NGOs have saying, this year that country has done better. Why? Because they have tortured less. Big deal. So therefore, we need to eliminate that barrier, that distraction, and have a permanent council. Once you have a permanent council, it needs two props. One is the civil society, which, as Ravi pointed out,
council, it needs two props. One is the civil society, which, as Ravi pointed out, council, it needs two props. One is the civil society, which, as Ravi pointed out, council, it needs two props.
You need to mute Ravi, you need to mute your video.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I love hearing myself.
No, he was playing back the YouTube link. That's what happened.
Yeah, that's fine.
Go ahead.
That's fine. No problem at all. But anyway, the fact is that governments left alone cannot, with all due respect, efficiently assess human rights. It is simply not possible for any given government to address effectively human rights issues. It doesn't mean that they are bad. It doesn't mean that they are unwilling. It doesn't mean that they are malicious. It means simply that human rights issues require the input of people. That's how it was conceptualized, and that's how it has developed over the years, over the decades. And we see when there's a problem, it's usually because there is either a lack of attention to the situation of people. If you look at the third preambular paragraph to the Universal Declaration, which actually addresses the likelihood of revolution and violence if the rule of law is not maintained, you will see what I mean. Therefore, civil society has to be a party to the process. Like governments, civil society is not pure, and therefore one should not, if you like, sanctify civil society. Civil society should be addressed as a party, a factor in a totality, an element. It's not the be-all and end-all, but civil society needs a role and influence into it. And therefore, the chamber that the book proposes is based on 5 forums in the 5 regions, or they can be more or less, it doesn't matter. And as Ravi pointed out, that is not new. I actually borrowed that quite rudely from the experience we made in the preparation of the World Conference, which took place in '93. The Bangkok Declaration that Ravi mentioned is worth reading. It is a real work of art, if you like, because it brought in the whole notion, it addressed the issue beautifully in terms of, at that time, there was a kind of cultural relativist movement going on, mainly from the Asian continent. But still, the NGO declaration at Bangkok gave the green light, or gave the lead to the governmental version of the Bangkok meeting. With the Bangkok Declaration of the Intergovernmental Meeting borrowed quite a few important elements from the NGO declaration. And so the forum idea, what I call a chamber for civil society, of course it needs to be developed, and I'm hoping that in these days NGOs would amplify this idea, but it's essential because I will mention later, the problem now is governments have always resisted civil society, sometimes with good reason, sometimes with very bad reason. But the fact is that what the Council has done now has never specifically prohibited. Yes, they kept NGOs out of the Universal Periodic Review completely. No NGO, you can only make a written submission, and that written submission will be then summarized into 10 pages by the Secretariat. And if you look at the list of submissions written by NGOs, you'll find 50, 60, 100 submissions to reduce into 10 pages, even with the genius of the Secretariat that we know exists. But so they're out. We need to bring them in. And the way it has been done, it's very clever to keep them out, is to flood the market. As I will say later, at the session last year, at this time, there were, I think, nearly 400 NGOs who participated or listed in the report of the Council. How can you get any benefit from the input of 400 NGOs in a session that is completely saturated with various other matters? So that is a problem that the book tries to address by encouraging reflection on how to streamline or filter the NGO input. The other one, which is equally vital, is the treaty system. I am suggesting, the book suggests, a chamber for norms and standards. A lot of the good work, they do excellent work of the treaty bodies, is wasted because it's limited only to the parties that they, even though the general comments and recommendations generally to the treaty as a whole. But it is clear from the experience of the Council that the Council would be very much benefited if it were to take into account the international human rights legal interpretations and jurisprudence of the treaty bodies. And therefore, the treaty bodies in this chamber, I suggest a chamber made up of the two main ones, plus a reference body for the other treaty bodies, to advise the Council on the international human rights legal aspects of the work, to make the work of the Commission, of the Council much easier, and it would give a big and welcome boost to the treaty system. Last is the special procedures. As I said earlier, the special procedures have done invaluable work. But the Council is not very happy with that, I get the feeling, because already, for example, the complaints, allegations handled by special procedures, in most cases, there are one or two exceptions, are no longer tabled in the main report of the rapporteur to the Council. They are taken as and incorporated into a kind of quasi-statistical document which is put to the UPR, where NGOs can't be. And even if you look at the document before the UPR, you will see a kind of technical acronym-infested document which only the avid interested party can actually try to decipher to see what it's about. And that is not in the nature of special procedures. So unfortunately, the policies followed by the Council at this time, regardless of their intentions, is to limit not only input by civil society, but also exposure of states, of governments rather, to the wider audience to which they are accountable. And that's why, and I want to cut short now, but that's why the book, I felt that the book needed to end with this kind of analysis or proposal. It is what the book itself produced. It wasn't anybody's invention. It was the result, it's the logical stage in the evolution that needs to be entered at this phase. I think I'll stop here and come back later on accountability. I'm sorry if I took too long, but anyway, and one final word. Yes, that I think why shouldn't we end with the beginning? If you look at the cover of the book, you will see the ceiling of the Human Rights Council chamber and the boat of refugees crossing, in that case, the Mediterranean. You know that hundreds drown every year when trying to cross the Mediterranean, and God knows how many in other oceans and seas and overland as they transit. The idea is to say that even though in the book I have tried to be pure and objective and clinical, I am not unconscious of the realities that we are facing, because it's one thing to have the chamber with this beautiful Spanish artistic ceiling, but it's also important to keep in mind that the equally beautiful Mediterranean is actually one of the best cemeteries that we have in the last few years. So on that not so joyful note, I would thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you for your interest in the book. I'm really very moved, I must say. And let's hope that as and when we get the opportunity, we shall be together in India this time, not just on a screen. Thank you.